So a very warm welcome to you this evening. It's great to have you all here. Very exciting for Advance. This is our first event in Indonesia and a lovely venue to be having such a great event. Tonight is all about, for us, mapping out who we have, Australians and Australian alumni in Indonesia, finding out who you are, what your stories are, connecting you with each other, and also connecting you back with Australia. And also hearing about some fantastic stories in our esteemed panel that we have in front of us tonight.
I'm the Chief Operating Officer for ANZ in Indonesia, and our business spans here kind of 3,000 kilometres across the archipelago, so we get to see quite a lot of what's happening out there. And we also span basically all aspects of the economy. So institutional banking, which is both investment flows in and out of Indonesia, trade flows, Indonesian corporates, state-owned enterprise building the national infrastructure, middle market Indonesian corporates, retail banking, and we also have a consumer finance business. So it's quite an extensive business, I think is probably the bottom line. And it's grown very rapidly in the last 6 years, pretty much since I've been here, or that's almost certainly coincidental. To answer the question, is Indonesia, are there opportunities? I think Indonesia is a great place to do business. Not easy, but great, with a lot of opportunity.
You know, running business in Indonesia, like any other emerging markets, you know, require a lot of managing of expectations, I suppose. And in this context between Indonesia and Australia, I would see that for any Australians to come and do business in a country like Indonesia, there needs to be a different kind of mindset to begin with, and set their expectations straight in the beginning. And one of my key rationale to when I speak to potential investors is simply the fact that being an emerging market, anybody who's coming in, especially newcomer, they would definitely need to consider tying up with the right local partner in order to be able to navigate in this market.
Well, I studied it. I've put all my life savings into a business, building business here. So I guess I would say that I think that there's a lot of opportunity in Indonesia, yes.
I work as a public policy. I'm leading the public policy and government affairs division for Google Indonesia, and also helping on the ASEAN part. So basically, that's my work. I think you're absolutely right. Google is very, if we look into Indonesia demographic, more than 50% of our demographic is actually young. We're looking into elections. This country, 40% of first-time voters are actually between the age of 18 and 20. So you can imagine the way they transform how people look for information, how people seek information, and how people digest information is very interesting, and definitely is a clear departure from how they work in, say, 2-3 years ago.
There's a need, but there's also opportunity. Get the right partner, have the right mindset. And to me, nothing's easy in life. And maybe for us Indonesians, we're sort of used to that, okay? Inconvenience here and inconvenience there, and we become really creative, right? I mean, you're stuck 3 hours in traffic, you make sure you have your power bank, do all your work in the car. The banking industry in Indonesia is one of the most profitable in the world. In terms of ROEs, we're talking about 20%, okay? And then in terms of growth, this is the proxy of economic growth, your banking system. I mean, Mandiri in year 2000, which is, 12, 13 years ago, was nowhere, and they're the largest bank today. My strategy when I build a business is, especially a new one, you just allocate money that you're ready to lose.
I think that that's exactly right, and I think it probably counts for big corporates as much as SMEs and young people who just want to make a go up here, right? I mean, you're going to you have to be prepared to lose everything. I mean, that was one of the really hard decisions for us, obviously, first leaving a nice cushy corporate job. You know, I don't get to stay in any nice hotels anymore, unfortunately. And then leaving Lazada. I mean, and I think that this doesn't really matter whether it's about your personal money, your personal well-being, or whether it's as a corporation. Like, I think what Leonie is saying is really wise. Like, the companies that have been successful, the Australian companies that have been successful up here have a long history. You know, for me, being in Indonesia is a little bit like doing my first multiple choice test when I was in year 6, and I got up to question 50 and realised that I was actually only on line 49, and I thought I'd been doing so well all the way along, and I realised that I'd just gotten every single question wrong because somewhere along I'd made a sort of a minor error that turned into a big one. And I think that it just takes a very, very long time to understand how to operate here. And you need to commit not only capital but patience and to be honest, a little bit of fear to it, because it isn't necessarily an easy path. It's the most rewarding thing you can do, but it's not an easy path. That's for sure, for businesses, for individuals, otherwise.
I think the risk for Australia is not that there is a gold rush mentality, but that there is very little Australian presence still. You know, a total of about 250 Australian entities invested in Indonesia. And, you know, frankly, it takes time to build the competence. So the point around, I think, being clear about what you want to lose prevails in any market, but you need to start doing some homework, you know, relatively early and relatively soon. You know, I think someone eloquently put it as the problem for Australia is actually no news is not good news. So where is Australia? It's that kind of sense. I would say bring on the gold rush.
Is that the case that, you know, a developed country like Australia, like any developed country, should just be thinking differently about what it has and how it can go into a market like Indonesia?
We seem to send a lot of backpackers around the world, and yet the business community is so insular and isn't necessarily prepared to explore the region and to make the most of the wealth of opportunities that do exist here, I think, yeah.
I would agree to that, especially because, but I think there's also a lot of room to learn in Indonesia. And I think, again, for the Australian, for example, 2014 is going to be a really hot cake year. It's going to be election year, there's no front runner. So if you're thinking of going in for the first time, you might wanna, you know, like start investing on relationship instead of investing the money. Instead of getting yourself wet, air the toes a little bit whilst, you know, looking around and start investing on the relationship, because comes October, this relationship that you've been investing in 10 months, that would really expedite your businesses.
Fundamentally, I think that the best thing about living in Indonesia is working with Indonesians. That might seem like an oxymoron, but that's the greatest, I guess, gift of this market. So call me an optimist, or I just think this is an enormous market. My uncle was in the hotel business in Australia, and he said that Australians always think north. For example, if you're in Melbourne, you'll take a holiday to Sydney. If you're in Sydney, you won't want to go to Melbourne. And I guess there's a limit of. I think that Australia was the number 10th investor in this market. I think Indonesia is very much more focused on going north, China, Malaysia, etc., than what Australia is. So I think the tables have turned, and Australia, in many senses, has lost its way. I hope that it reverses, but the thing is that this is such a big market, so many opportunities, and I can't afford to, I can't not be optimistic.
I constantly cannot find, I think 90% of my friends, Australian friends, are from mining and oil. There is very little representation of any other industry I find from Australia in Jakarta. And even friends from South Africa, they work for defence, they work for software, they work for, but Australians are very much, and I don't live in the Australian community, but it's very much mining. Occasionally someone from the Australian International School, but we're very, very underrepresented, except for banking probably, in any other service industry. And Australia has, to my support of John, I think Australia is going through a very crucial time in its life cycle as to what it will be in the next 10, 20, 30 years. Because mining is definitely not going to be that cash cow anymore.
One of the great delights of working in Indonesia is actually working with Indonesians, and in terms of the business implications of that, they are, I would say, quite profound. So, you know, our business has grown 6 or 7-fold in the last 6 years. That rests on, and you know, there's quite a few of my colleagues in the room, so this is not about flattery, folks, but there is, I would say, huge energy and huge capability that can be leveraged here, and you know, huge creativity. So you know, the question for Australia is how actually to integrate and work with that.
The thing that has impressed me the most during my 3 years in Indonesia is fantastic young Indonesians in the private sector. It really is a very different beast to the beast that I saw when I first came to Indonesia in 1999, and I lived here for 3.5 years then. To come back, it's a different generation, a different mindset, an incredible upskill. Just the way that young Indonesians have really gripped it up in the last decade, I think is so impressive, and I'm very confident that these guys and gals can compete. I know they're worried about ASEAN integration, the ASEAN community by 2015. They're worried about whether Indonesia can compete. I am confident that a lot of the young Indonesian talent that I see in the private sector can more than compete in the ASEAN environment, and I think Indonesia has a lot of reason to be confident that these people, when they go through the system and get into middle and senior management roles, they will genuinely be able to deliver, and there will be better quality, better managed, innovative Indonesian companies that really do great things in the years ahead.
I would argue the opportunity in Indonesia is not so much to be the BHP or BHP Junior or anything like that. It's a service industry. The thing that we've got in Australia, and I come back to the IT side of it, is we've got a time zone, but we're online with 3/4 of the world's population, including Indonesia. So when you think of setting up a platform in Australia that you can operate in the 21st century, then you're moving, and it's really our smart industry, not what we make and not even what we dig out of the ground. That's in my mind the missing link. This is an archipelago of 1,000 islands. The difficulty of communicating, providing power, all that sort of stuff. This is intelligence that Australia's got a lot of.
I think, you know, the point about supply chain integration, whether it's in the services sector, whether it's in technology, whether it happens to be in agriculture, there is a lot of complementarity between the Indonesian economy and the Australian economy. Australia's got a lot of IP. Indonesia has got a workforce which is very good to work with. So put that together, you've actually got a very strong combination across a number of different sectors.
I think the real question for Australia will be, you know, Australia has been fortunate to benefit in two different ways from Southeast Asia over the last 20 years. Firstly, that a large number of Southeast Asian students, as in either high school or university students, have come down. Many of them have lived there and have now returned. And these people are the obvious people that we need to be activating and maintaining that relationship, because they are really brilliant, culturally diverse people. And that, I think, is to everybody's benefit from a foreign policy, from a commercial perspective. It doesn't matter which way you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, we view the market through the lens of our core competencies. And I think that's actually really important, because if you're going to go somewhere else, make sure you know what you're doing before you go there. So those core competencies also reflect, as they're applied in Indonesia, they also reflect, as I said before, the complementarity of the Australian and Indonesian economies. And so those complementarities are around natural resources. Australia is very good at natural resources, so is Indonesia. Australia actually has a competency around infrastructure, which Indonesia could benefit from. Australia has core competency around agriculture, which Indonesia, and think of this as a rising middle class, but also as supply chain integration into ASEAN and points beyond. So it's a story that's also beyond Indonesia. There are fundamental underlying drivers in the economy which are not going to go away anytime soon. And you know, we're talking 20 odd more years in terms of a demographic dividend. So that has implications for consumer markets in the e-space. It has implications if you're talking about SME business. 12% of Indonesian business has access to credit, an astoundingly low number. That's 80% in Thailand by comparison. So, you know, it's those kind of longer term prospects which are still there. Same, for instance, in our consumer finance business, again, a rising middle class, spending on all kinds of things. So, as I said, it's about, that's just a lens based on how we see banking from Australia, but the applicability of it for this market is profound.
That brings tonight's formal proceedings to an end. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion that we've had here. So as I've said, this is the third in a 4-part series that we are conducting with ANZ across Asia. Hopefully this will become an annual fixture, so we'll be here again around this time next year to continue the discussion. If you haven't already joined Advance, I'd urge you to do that. It's a very simple process. Just go online and join up for free, and then keep connected to us and to your fellow Australians around the world, and also alumni or people who are connected to Australia in some way, shape or form. We at Advance think that the resources within this room are a really important resource for Australia. And so we like to connect with you and also profile what it is that you're doing outside of Australia.